Okay, for this video I'm going to demonstrate how to mark out and cut a dovetail halving. For this job, the tools we are going to need are a tri-square, we will need a marking gauge, we will need a 19 or a 25mm chisel, we'll probably need a mallet, a tenon saw, a sliding bevel for our angle, and something to measure with. First off, we need to face mark and face edge our timber, picking the best face and edge. So on this one we have a little knot here, so we're going to use this face, which is clear, and this edge, which is clear, and mark those. For this timber, the only defect we've got on this one is some blue stain, which doesn't affect the timber other than its appearance. But we will use this clear face and we will use this clear edge. The first thing I'm going to mark out is the shoulder line for the dovetail part of our joint. This will be the width of our timber that we are going to, so we don't really need to measure, but we could if we wanted to. But I'm going to use the timber we're using, the width that we're going across, and we can mark the shoulder line on our timber there, and mark round with our tri-square. Shoulders marked. What we'll need to do, as it says a halving joint, we're going to need to halve our timber. So for that we're going to use a marking gauge, and we'll need to set this up halfway. To do this again, we don't really need to measure. If we set our pin to where we think is roughly halfway, and if we mark one side, we turn our timber round and mark it the other side, and if our pin falls in the hole both ways, then we know we're exact centre, which in this case it is. So we need to roll the pin down, lightly roll it down, and we can go over that and make our line a little deeper. We can do the same on our end grain. And on this side, I'll pin where I want to finish, so that when I roll down, I won't go beyond our shoulder line. From there we can just highlight our gauge line with a pencil. Okay, from there we can hatch out what is going to be our waist, so we know which side of our line we're going to cut. Now we need to mark on our angled lines for our dovetail. This angle is traditionally 1 in 6 for softwood and 1 in 8 for hardwood. What we're going to use today actually is 1 in 7, and that we use for either softwood or hardwood. So for our 1 in 7 angle, our ratio, we need to pick a unit that we're going to use. In this case we're going to use centimetres, but we could use inches, we could use metres if we wanted. The angle will remain the same, just the scale of it will be different. So in this case 1 in 7 is going to be around about 7 to 8 degrees if we were going to measure it as an angle. So we need a starting point. We can use our timber to mark it out on. We can use a starting point. We can measure down seven centimetres, so 7 units of 10. We can mark another line, and then we want 1 unit out. can join up. And there we have a 1 in 7 angle. We can then set our sliding bevel to the angle so that we can mark out on our timber. Like so. When we mark our dovetail on the end, it's very hard to begin a cut right from the very corner, so we will mark 2mm in from each side so that we've got a flat area to start our cut from. From that point we can put our sliding bevel with the stock on the side of our timber, bring it down to our 2mm line, and mark our angle. Turn it over and likewise on the other side. Okay, so there we're marked out. These bits again will be our waste. If you want to, you can hatch those, show what we're cutting out. If we're marking across our timber, we can set up the same angle, the same ratio of angle, but in just a slightly different way. So if we had a bit of sheet material, a piece of timber, we can mark ourselves a line across there. We can mark our 7 units across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we can mark our 1 unit up. And again from there, if we join those, it will give us our 1 in 7 angle. And there we've got the same angle, but with our bevel like that, we can actually mark across the timber. And that we could use to mark out the housing part of our joint, although in this case what we are going to use is the actual dovetail we cut to mark ours. So now what I'm going to do is actually cut the dovetail out. What I do first is I tend to rip timber first and then cut the shoulders across. Some people may do it the opposite way. To rip down our dovetail, I'm going to cut on the waist side of our line. I'm going to cut from the corner. And I'll cut to at least halfway across our timber and to at least 2/3 of the way down our timber. That I'm now going to turn around and I'll do the same thing on the other side. You can now upright your timber and you can put your tenon saw in. That will now follow the cuts that you've made and will give you a flat surface for your joint. From there we're going to cut across our shoulders. going to start from one corner using the thumb to guide the saw and slowly bringing it down on the line that we've marked. Once we've got across the timber, we want to be looking at the 90 degrees, following the line down. So we have part of our halving joint. Then I'm going to cut the shoulders around where the dovetail is. Now at this point, we've got two different ways we can do it. We can either use a chisel to get rid of our waste there, or we can cut with a saw. We use a chisel, use 25mm. So we can chisel down to our line, or we can saw. If you use the saw, put your angle so that it's upright, so you're cutting. And so we form our dovetail. Just tidy that one up a bit. Edit this bit. So for the housing part of our joint, we need to measure out and work out where it is we need our housing. When we've done that, we can mark a square line across. The distance across our markings will be the width of our timber. So again, we can use our timber to mark what we need. We don't need to measure. When we've marked, we can then mark the second square line across. And these lines we'll need to take down at least halfway on our edge. We can mark our halfway point again with our marking gauge, working from our face side, So when we've marked out, we can put our dovetail that we've already cut onto our timber, and we can mark our dovetail. That we can then mark down. We're just over halfway. And from our face, we can use our marking gauge to mark halfway across that timber. With our tenon saw, we can now cut across those lines down to halfway. And we can also put several relief cuts in there which will make it easier to chisel out. Chiseling out, I tend to use a chisel with the bevel down so that it brings it up to the middle. Once we chisel down to our line, we can then turn our chisel over and flatten out the bottom of our housing. And your dovetail should go together, not too tight, and it certainly shouldn't fall out. And obviously no gaps, should be either on your shoulders or on the dovetail part of your joint.